Hi Year 11s, welcome to the second video in our series for Jog Your Memory. So again, this is looking at what you guys asked us to do some revision on. And the second most popular thing was your concerns about geology and glaciation. So hope you've got your Jog Your Memory sheet with you and going through that, taking notes during the video, and then doing the tasks as we go through. Okay. So, why do we study this? Well, some of the most amazing landscapes in the world are related to these two things. So I'm just showing you some inspiring pictures that are related to both geology and glaciation, just to get you warmed up for these things. Amazing landscapes, which hopefully you will agree are truly inspiring. But what we need to do this lesson is to really think about how have these landscapes been shaped, and it all comes down to two things: the geology and glaciation. And when we talk about geology, you should remember that we're talking about the study of rocks, and that's what geology means, just the study of different rock types in different areas. And what the exam boards will want you to do is to be able to describe the distribution of rock types in the UK. So this map here shows you the basic outline of geology in the UK and where they are. So you can see a general pattern on this map, where to the north and west of the T's X line we have more harder rocks. We have our igneous and metamorphic rocks. And to the south and east of the line we have our softer rocks, our sedimentary rocks. And those will affect the landscapes that we get in those different areas. Where we have hard rocks, we get certain types of landscapes, which we'll look into. And then where we have softer rocks, we have other types of landscapes. So what I'd like you to do as part of your first exercise is to describe the distribution of rock types across the UK. Now remember, when we're describing distribution, we want to have things like compass directions, some specific locations. If you're not sure about the specific locations, then that's why we want you to use compass directions. Okay, so I'll give you a minute to have a go at that and to explain or describe the distribution of rock types across the UK. So I mentioned that we get different types of landscapes, and this is again something that the examiners want you to know and to be able to explain. Okay, so I've got a picture here of an upland area, the Grampian Mountains, so up in Scotland. You might have mentioned that sort of thing in your description of distribution. These are where we've got our metamorphic and igneous rocks. Okay, but you guys need to be able to describe or recognize these landscapes. So what I want you to do is to, on your Jog Your Memory sheet, is to describe what this landscape is like. So I'll give you a minute to do that, and then I might give you some clues as to what you might want to put in there. So some of the key things that you might have said in your description of what the upland landscapes are like are that they are more mountainous. Okay, you can see in this picture we've got mountainous landscapes. We've also got landforms like valleys going on here, but you'll also notice that in the background in our mountains there's not much vegetation. All of that soil, the nutrients, have been worn away by the glaciers during the Ice Age, and so we're left with quite bare landscapes. Not a lot of nutrients in the soils there for agriculture to take place. And then also that might also lead to the types of settlements that we get. Yes, we've got some settlements at the bottom of the valley here, but in our upland areas very few settlements. It's more difficult for people to build in than it is in our lowland areas. So now you're going to make a comparison with your lowland area and think about how this is different. You should be able to pick out some key differences between upland and lowland landscapes based on what I mentioned just earlier. Okay, so now we're going to look into why have we got these different landscapes. What are the processes that are going on behind the scenes for us to really get these amazing landscapes and these different processes going on. And what we want to look at is thinking about weathering. which is the breakdown of rocks in situ. There's no movement involved with the rocks, okay? They're being broken down in that location. And freeze thaw is an example of weathering processes. So freeze thaw is where we've got a crack in the rock, it might rain and that water fills up the crack. So in our first diagram here, during the night or during the winter, that water is going to freeze, and ice has a larger volume than water, and so it expands, and over time that expansion of the ice pushes apart the rock. Then it will thaw during the daytime or during the summer, so it will melt, and then acting again, it will freeze at night, so expand again and force the rock apart, and then contract when it melts. Freeze and thaw, freeze, thaw, freeze, thaw. And over time that expansion and contraction forces the rock apart. And you can see on this picture here where this rock has been split in half because of weathering, and particularly freeze thaw. Erosion is different. Erosion is the removal of material by sediment or sediment by a river, a glacier, or the sea. So when material is taken away from a landscape, that's our process of erosion. Okay, so erosion has a couple of examples that you guys need to know about when it comes to glaciation. And the first is plucking. Plucking is when the glacier moves down the mountain and it freezes around rocks, and as it moves it pulls the rocks away from the side of the valley and it takes them with them. Okay, so that plucking is the removal of rocks because the ice freezes around the rocks and takes them with them. Okay, once that material is in the ice, as the glacier moves down the mountain, it scrapes the bottom of the valley and the sides of the valley, and that scraping, that sandpaper effect, is called abrasion. Okay, so two types of erosion that you need to know when it comes to glaciation. We've got plucking and we've got abrasion going on, and both of them make the valleys deeper and wider. Okay, so where we've got glaciation, those processes are occurring. The last two processes you need to know with glaciation are transportation and deposition. Transportation is just the fact that these glaciers, although they're pieces of ice, they are carrying huge amounts of material, and that material is called moraine. So moraine is the material a glacier is carrying. Okay. Once that material moves down the glacier, as the glacier moves further down, at some point the glacier will start to melt, and it leaves behind that material, and that's what's known as terminal moraine. So if you think about climate change at the moment, glaciers are retreating. Well, they don't carry that material backwards. The glacier melts and it deposits that material, so it leaves it behind, and that deposition is what leads to things like terminal moraine. So these hills at the end of a glacier which are left behind because of the melting glacier. So what I want you guys to do now is to think about just checking on your understanding of these processes. So you have an example here of your keywords, so processes, and they're mixed up, and definitions on the other side. And what I want you guys to do is just spend a bit of time matching up the keywords here with the definitions on the right hand side. So have a go, and then you'll be able to check your answers in a minute. Well done. So hopefully you got most of those. Double check your answers now, pause the video, and make sure you're on top of your keywords and processes. Okay, so now that we know our key terms and the kind of processes that are going on behind the scenes, we can start to explain the shapes that we get. And those shapes are called landforms. And the first shape that we want you to know and understand is a corrie. We've got to understand how a glacier forms in the first place. And this is your next task, is to think about how a glacier forms and how we get a corrie as a result. So a corrie is this bowl shape that you get on the side of mountains, okay, and it is formed because of a glacier. But how do we get those glaciers in the first place? Well, snow first accumulates, so it gathers in a hollow, and over time, as it gathers, more and more snow sort of compresses. So if you think about when you get a snowball and you squash it together, it turns into ice. Okay, and ice has much more erosive power than snow. So we get in a hollow, we get snow accumulating, it compresses in to form ice. Once it becomes ice, the force of gravity then starts to pull down on it, and so it can start to move. And that movement is what starts to shape the landscape. Because as we've talked before, the glacier picks up material, so it plucks material from the side of the valleys, and then it abrades the landscape. And that abrasion makes the hollow deeper. Okay, and because it's becoming deeper, we get what's called a rotational slip. We get this rotation of the glacier, which is what makes the bowl shape. Okay, so we've got freeze thaw acting at the top here, which provides us with the material. We've got plucking at the back here, which also adds material to the glacier. We've got abrasion scraping away at the bottom, which makes the corrie much deeper. And then towards the bottom, what we have is, as the glacier moves down the landscape, it starts to melt. Okay, so you might have a thinner glacier here because it's warmer. And where we've got thinner glacier, we've got much less erosion happening. And that's why we've got this bowl shape. So where we've got very thick ice, lots of erosion taking place because it's really heavy. And then as you move down the mountain, thinner ice because it's warmer and therefore less erosion taking place. So what we want you to do now is just to take that information and to complete the blanks in your on your sheet, so that you've got a model answer of how we get glaciers and a corrie. So pause your video here and you'll be able to go through and answer your questions. Okay, so once again, check your answers, make sure you've got it correct in your on your Geog Your Memory sheets, so that you've got those notes to go back to in your revision. So the next landform we need you to know about are V-shaped valleys and U-shaped valleys. V-shaped valleys are caused by fluvial erosion, so a river flowing through the landscape. Okay, and it's very much like if you lock together your knuckles like this. Okay, so you can see that there's a V shape and the river would flow in between each of my knuckles, and those knuckles, when you get these shapes, are called they're called interlocking spurs. So these little bits here that we can see in the valley, they are interlocking. They're kind of, the river is winding through this landscape, taking the easiest route down. Okay, and that's how we know that it's a V-shaped valley, because it's got relatively steep sides and a small river flowing through it, or a river that fits anyway. And we've got these interlocking spurs, so the bits like your knuckles. Okay. A U-shaped valley is different. A U-shaped valley is caused by glacial erosion, so a massive glacier going through this landscape. And you can see that it's much wider and much deeper, and it also has a misfit river at the bottom. That river is far too small to have caused this massive valley, and so we know that it's been shaped by a glacier, and it's a U-shaped valley. So on your sheets, your last exercise is to explain how we get U-shaped valleys. Here we've got a comparison between our V-shaped valleys and our U-shaped valleys, and I want you to compare what has gone on for us to get these different U-shaped valleys. I suggested a few keywords for you guys to use. So at bronze level, we obviously want U-shaped valleys, glacier, river erosion, deeper and wider. At gold level, we want you to think about using things like fluvial erosion and truncated spurs. So have a look at those two diagrams to help you to understand and to write your explanation at the bottom of your geography memory sheets. If you've got any questions, get in touch with me or your geography teacher, and we can help you out further. All the best. See you soon.